Alright, guys, welcome back to another episode of the League Express podcast. My name's Jake Kearnan, and joining me as always is the editor of League Express, Martyn Sadler. And Martyn, we welcome back the one and only John Kear. How was your weekend, fellas?
Great, but not good enough, really. um, it was. I thought it was a wonderful event at Headingley, actually, Jake, but it just had the wrong result. And John, you were doing a TV punditry with the BBC at Headingley. You did a great job, but unfortunately, you didn't score any tries, mate. So,
No,
what did you make of it,
me in
John?
England, yeah.
The great John, yeah.
It was a great day, wasn't it? And I thought the atmosphere there was sensational. You know, I think Headingley's the best rugby league stadium in the Northern Hemisphere, and
Mm.
I thought it lived up to that name this last weekend because it was packed. The atmosphere was sensational. The crowd were engaged in the game, and it just made it for a really good game of rugby league for 62, 63 minutes. And then obviously at the very end, we just fell away a little.
Mm.
Yeah, that's the disappointing for me over here, mate, is we get the Australian commentary, so I wasn't able to hear you on the mic, John, mate. So I trust Martyn when he says you had a good call. Um, but yeah, I was bummed I couldn't be there myself, fellas. You touched on it there, John, the atmosphere. I guess, how do you think being at that ground, having that northern sort of Leeds crowd, how do you think that compared to the other matches? And I guess also playing on an actual rugby league pitch, it seemed like it made a difference in terms of the style of rugby we saw on the field. The attack seemed to be a lot better.
I just think it was the best of the three, to tell you the truth, with regard to atmosphere. I think Everton's obviously got a future. I think there's got to be some debate about Wembley. I know the Australian players love playing there, but it just does. An international should have a full house. You should take that as read. And if we can't fill Wembley, we've got to be realistic, accept that, and look elsewhere. Even if we want to play a test match down south, there are stadiums down south that have got 50 or 40,000, and we could fill them. So I just think it's a better look as a PR stunt, should it say, for a game. But Headingley was sensational. It really was.
Yeah, I'm not sure I agree about Wembley though, John, because if we aspire to be a national sport, which we obviously do, then I think we've got to be prepared to play in the national stadium. There's been a lot of criticism of the atmosphere at Wembley and the fact that we couldn't fill it. We only two-thirds filled it in effect. But the truth is that 60,000, I think, is the record attendance for an
Yeah,
Ashes game in this country, and that was at Wembley. And 60,000 couldn't have fitted into. I mean, you look at how many other stadiums could fit 60,000 in, and there are not that many. And Wembley is still, whatever we say about it, so iconic, and it certainly means a lot more to the Aussie players, and I'm sure the English players as well. The unfortunate thing is that the way that tickets are sold for Wembley, all those 30,000 seats were all on the top tier that weren't sold, and made it look like a yawning sort of chasm in a sense. So it didn't look great when you had certain camera angles that showed, all the unsold seats. But nonetheless, for most of that game on TV, I thought it did look fine. The upper tier facing the cameras was pretty full. And if we'd had 60,000 people there distributed throughout the stadium, fairly randomly, it would have looked a lot better, actually. But so I just think we've got to learn how to sell our game. It's if there are 90,000 seats to sell, we've got to find a way to sell 90,000 seats, just as the American football people do when they play
yeah.
games at Wembley. A few years ago, nobody would have ever imagined that American football would sell out at Wembley, but it comes pretty near to selling out. The Jacksonville Jaguars were playing a game there the week before we were there, and they got 82,000 people there.
Mm.
So let's find out how they do it and get some guidance as to how to sell more effectively.
Well, yeah, I mean, yeah. I mean, I'm a big believer in we should hold the marketing and commercial people a lot more accountable as coaches are, to tell you the
Well,
truth.
yes.
And and I also think as well. the responsibility of the players as well to generate that atmosphere, because the atmosphere was good at Everton because England came out with a bit of dogged physicality, and you could tell straight away they were going to straighten, one or two Aussies up, and it was the same at Headingley. Whereas I felt the Wembley game, it was like a warm-up game. It was so flat and it lacked intensity on the field, and it made it really comfortable for Australia, to tell you the truth, rather than make it a bear pit of a atmosphere on the field, which might well have then transferred off the field.
Yeah, and the problem was that the Aussies scored too early in that game, and it looked as though it was going to be a one-sided game at Wembley from fairly early on in the game, didn't it? Whereas the other two games, at least, were appeared to be a lot closer for most of the game. I mean, it would have been interesting to see what the atmosphere at Wembley would have been like. Let's imagine England had scored 2 tries in the first 20 minutes, for example. Would the crowd have responded? I'm sure they would have done then. You can. I don't think it's wise to blame the crowd for a flat atmosphere when we didn't give them a great amount to cheer for, John. If we're honest about it, it's difficult to create an atmosphere when there's not much to create an atmosphere about. So I wouldn't blame Wembley for that personally.
Now, fellas, we might pivot from that. We'll jump into the weekend's performance. We'll start off the game as a whole. Discussions before the podcast, great for 60 minutes. John, where do you think England just came up short in this one?
I think basically it's the fact that we've had some selection inconsistencies. Australia knew that. I think they came over here and they knew their best team from that squad from minute one. I don't think we did. I think we were learning on the hoof. So there's that aspect of it. The other aspect is that, we weren't just clinical when we got opportunities. And I think the third quarter of the last test, where England had Australia under the pump, they'd got field position, they were camped on their line, but we just couldn't find a way to score. So our creativity wasn't at its best. And, I know effort was tremendous, the determination, the grit was great, but Jamie Peacock said in the build-up to the game on Saturday, he said, well, that's like clapping fish for swimming, because it is right as well. That should be a gimme for any international game. It really should. And we've got to look at, I believe, the squad that was picked and the inconsistencies within the 3 games.
John, how much damage do you think it did England with AJ Brimson having to leave the field so early with that shoulder injury?
I thought it was. I mean, that was a big loss, because I thought he showed some great signs at Everton. Did Brimson, and he is a good player. He's an exciting player with lots of pace, and he supports well, and he does provide a threat. But it's like anything else. We look back, and it's always easy in hindsight. But for me, I'd have gone down. I'd have picked Morgan Knowles at 9, Morgan Smithies at 13, first tests, just to be very physical with them for 20, 25 minutes, and then brought Jez Litton on, and I'd have had Herbie Farnworth at fullback as well, because your best ball carrier needs to get the ball in his hand as often as possible, and the people who get the ball in their hands the most are 9, 7, 6, 1. So you've got to manufacture a way of getting him in there. So, we've all got different opinions. It's always easy in hindsight, but I'll tell you, it's a heck of a lot more difficult being a foresight coach than a hindsight coach.
No doubt about that. Well, I'm a good hindsight coach, mate, but I couldn't be a foresight one. It's interesting. We make the one of the points that's really important is that the Australians are really good at taking advantage of mistakes that we made. And that very early one, when Joe Burgess was adjudged to have knocked the ball on, the Aussies got the ball and immediately worked it out to Josh Adokar for a try. The thing that amazed me, John, about that incident was that we didn't mount a captain's challenge. Because I didn't think he did knock the ball on, personally. If you looked at the replay afterwards, it looked very dubious.
It.
Yeah, it did recover it.
He did, yes.
And they should have challenged it. And there was a later incident as well. You were talking just now about, the third quarter, we were attacking them relentlessly. And there was another incident where Mike McMeekin was adjudged to have knocked the ball on. And it was a clear strip as far as I was concerned. But again, they didn't mount a captain's challenge. And that just amazed me, really. And later on, they did pursue a captain's challenge when Callum Watkins clearly did knock the ball on, and they failed. So it was just bad tactics. I mean, I suppose they didn't go for a captain's challenge in the Burgess incident because they feared losing it, I imagine, early in the game. But God, if you've got to. I'm sure Burgess would have said, "Let's make a captain's challenge." I'm sure he would have said it. I didn't knock it on, and you could tell from his body language that he was making that case. And we should have gone for it, surely.
Yeah, I agree totally. I mean, I actually said that on the commentary, that I felt it would have been worth doing. But there is a fear about losing that challenge. But I think also sometimes you've got to back your gut instinct and back your players as well. So,
of course,
there were crucial little things. But the thing about it is, that the Australians they can just handle it, and that's what came through in the third quarter. The resilience. And the sort of defensive desperation that they demonstrated on their own line, I thought it was absolutely outstanding. And they are, there's no doubt about it, they're a very difficult team to score against. And that's why you can't sort of gift chances away. If you get a chance, it's got to be nailed. And, there's got to be a thorough review of what happened, as there is every time that there's a World Cup or a Test series, etc. And we've got to take on what we did well and what we did not so well, and learn from that to try to progress. Because the next time England play, it looks as if it's going to be in a World Cup.
It's interesting to talk about the Aussie defence, and we've said it before on this podcast that the nearer you get to the Australians' line, the stronger their defence seems to be. To try and attack them from 10 metres out. It looks almost an impossible task to me, and it's interesting that the only try we scored on Saturday came from much deeper when Jez Litton ran from dummy half and kicked for George Williams to score. And I just think, John, I just wonder whether that really means that we ought to try much harder to attack from deeper in the field. Really, if we're going to breach the Australian defence, try and attack when it's not last ditch defending on their part, but if we are more creative with the ball, we can perhaps make opportunities as Litton did.
Yeah, I mean, there's that aspect of it. There's the aspect that if you do what you've always done, and we've tried what we did before, you get what you've always got, and we did do, and that might be one aspect to do. But I just think as well we've got to learn from their desperation, and I think it was James Graham on the call who said that one of the Australian tries, which came from a grubber kick through, if Reece Walsh would have been defending that we wouldn't have been able to recover the ball. And I think that's the mindset and desperation that we've got to get in our game. And it comes through intensity within the competition, within the NRL competition. It's difficult to score in the NRL because the levels are so high, the intensity level is so high, and consequently, I believe the standard of play is higher than we've got in Super League. And I do honestly believe that the results reflect the relative competitions. Despite the fact we had some NRL players in our team, but, not that many really, is it?
Just wondering, John, now that the dust has settled on the Ashes series, how much change do you think we're going to need to make for the World Cup next year? I mean, the obvious debating point, really, concerns the future of Shaun Wane as the England coach. You're a former England coach yourself. Obviously, Shaun was devastated by this loss. I don't think it's unfair to say that about him. He clearly was extremely disappointed, particularly to lose 3-0. But he's really determined to carry on for the World Cup next year. He made it very obvious afterwards in everything he said, that he wants to retain the job for next year, and he believes that he can turn England's fortunes around. What do you think?
I think you should keep it, yeah, because what you're going to do if you do get rid of him, you're going to bring someone else in who will have a different set of assistant coaches, and it's going to be a rebuild from foundation upwards. And I think also you've got to put it in perspective as well. So it did beat Samoa 2-0 and Tonga 3-0. And anybody who watched the Pacific Championship will see the standard of play over there as well. So, you don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. So I think there's been progress made, and I think we've got to stick to that, or else there's an element of us as a nation and as a governing body, etc., panicking. And I think we've got to sort of back him and say, look, you've had a lot of success. There was a glitch here. Let's learn from that. And you can sit down as his employers and sort of say, well, what have you learned, and who do you feel could have been brought in who would have improved the squad, and could we have changed anything in the build-up? So it needs to be a really thorough review before any decision is made. But I would certainly keep him, because I think you're throwing the baby out with the bathwater, and I do think it's his first major blip. I know we lost the semi-final, but that was a golden point job against Samoa. But that's the first serious glitch that we've had.
Mm.
And we've touched on it a little bit this episode already, fellas, but the fact that there seems to be no international games being played in the Northern Hemisphere, at least until the World Cup, do you think there's going to be any opportunity for Wayne to get that potential possible squad together to maybe do a couple of training sessions? Like, it just seems like they're not going to have an opportunity to build on this series until they're in the thick of it next year again.
They won't, Jake. No, they won't, because clubs as well, and this again is part of the governance issue that we've got. Basically, the clubs are so important in running the game, and I know in the NRL you've got a separate governance who basically instruct and direct the clubs. And I think that's what we've got to learn, and we've got to take that on board. And I'm sure if Peter Vlandis and the NRL come in, they'll make sure there is a restructure of the governance of the game, and that may well help the national team in the long run.
Absolutely. I was going to
on the theme of next year, though, John. Let's have a look at the squad. Do you think George Williams should still be there as captain? What did you feel about? I mean, there was quite a big move among some people to suggest that the halfback combination last Saturday should have been Michael Lewis and Harry Smith. People weren't that happy with some of George's contributions in the first two tests. Do you think George should continue to be the captain?
I think what we're in danger of, Martyn, is trying to pick a World Cup team when we've got a season of rugby league football in front of us. Full well, I don't think until the playoff series down under that perhaps Reece Walsh would have been considered the starting fullback for Australia. But because of his contribution in the playoff series, especially in the grand final, you just couldn't pick him. You could not pick him because of his form. And I think, you can't pick a World Cup team 12 months in advance. We've got to see who's playing well and then pick the players who are playing really well. And you've just got to do that, because there can be so many changes within 12 months, with injuries, with form, with selections at clubs, that I think we can't pick it now. We've got to plan and prepare and make sure all the logistics are in place. But I think the players ultimately should pick the team with the form, and the coach should just announce it.
Yeah. And talking about Shaun, still, John, the one thing that's very obvious, to me at least, from speaking to one or two players, is that they're all very supportive of him. I don't think, and people might say, well, they would say that because, they support a coach who's picked them for England. But I think it goes beyond that. I think they are very supportive of him. And it would be difficult at this stage, wouldn't it, in a sense, to introduce somebody else, to whom they would then have to transfer that loyalty for the World Cup.
I think it'd be a step backwards to try to take two forwards. Well, why not just take two forwards from where we are now? So
Mm,
yeah, I mean, and that's my point. There isn't we haven't got an Origin series coming up,
no.
whereas Australia have, and that will obviously influence a lot of the thoughts about them as their playoff series will in the build up to the World Cup. But we haven't got that. We haven't got that luxury of an Origin series, and that needs to be one thing that needs looking at to produce some high intensity games. The high intensity games in Australia inevitably are the Origin games, the games to get in the playoffs, and then the playoff games. And I don't think we can replicate that on a consistent enough basis at the minute to challenge them.
I've been keeping an eye on that Chasing History documentary series that England Rugby League have been putting out on their YouTube channel, just a behind the scenes look of the England camp throughout the Ashes series and the way the players interact with Shaun Wane. You can tell they really have an affection for him, you might say. He's always, shaking the boys' hands, giving him a hug, making sure they're going all right. You can tell by the interactions that they have a lot of respect for him. So I think you would be,
Yeah,
upsetting the team a little bit if you were to get rid of him, right?
I agree.
Fellas, from an English standpoint, looking at the Australian team, what did you make of their performance this series?
Well, again, I think they've got more stick than they should have for their quality of performance. And the talk about they weren't so hot in attack. Well, they scored enough tries, so
Yeah.
they were hot enough
Yeah.
for me. And and we did challenge them. It was hard for them to play in a fluent way as well. So they were challenged, and I thought it was interesting the last test, especially early on, that they made sure that they moved the England players about. They weren't just carrying in at the ABC, the first three defenders in the line and the markers, because they copped a few wallops in the second test. So they sorted that out and tried to find a way around it to move us around and make it a little different. So I think the Aussies played better than they're getting credit for, to tell you the truth. So
They actually moved the ball right in the first tackle, John,
they
right
did
from the kickoff,
in their
if you
own
remember,
20-metre zone. Yes, they did. Well, from the kickoff, they got the
which
kickoff,
looked different, didn't it, from
and
what
all
had
England are
gone before?
chasing up, ready to whack the player who's carrying the ball, and simply they passed it to fullback, and then it was the other side prop. So you weren't taking it at the big fella straight away; you were taking it at the edges.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And
No, I think
that's what the smart players, the smart, and I've always been. If anybody watches the NRL, if you see Cleary, if you see Munster, they can change how they're playing on the hoof as well. Obviously they have game plans, etc. But if it's not working, they're confident enough and their rugby IQ is high enough that they can change game plans on the hoof, and they're happy to do so. If that isn't working, we'll go to something else. And you can just see that they're just very, very clever rugby league players, and that comes. It's a major sport in New South Wales and Queensland. That's where it comes from. Whereas our major sport, our first choice athletes, shall we say, they'd pick to play football, and you can understand why when you see the wages they get. But
absolutely.
that's where we're at.
It is true to say, isn't it, when you think about it, that's a really good point to make, that if Reece Walsh had been born in England, let's say in London or Birmingham or somewhere, it would be 1,000,000 to 1 against him playing rugby league over
Yeah,
here. A guy with his athletic ability would inevitably have gone to football, probably, or even the other rugby code, or done something different. Who knows? But probably wouldn't have been a rugby league player, in a sense.
there
Yeah.
certainly is. And then we could do one or two on this side of the hemisphere as well, couldn't we?
We
And,
certainly
and
I
could.
they really are. They've got plenty of players, and the competition is high intensity, and they're going to take some knocking off. And that competition standard is reflected in the Tonga, the Samoa teams, because they're in and amongst that environment as well. And that's why they're so tough to. And anybody who watched the New Zealand performance in that final against Samoa, I mean, that second half performance, 30 points to nil, they whacked Samoa. And they didn't make an error with the ball. It was 100% completion rate.
Mm.
And that's the standard that we've got to aspire to.
The Kiwis are a real threat to Australia next year, aren't they?
Yes, yes.
And at the moment, you'd say the World Cup final would, in all probability, be between Australia
Yep,
and New Zealand
you
rather
would.
than us, which
I
would
was
be
gonna
disappointing.
I was gonna ask you fellas off the back that where do you have the international standings at the moment? Where would you place each team in the top five?
Oh, that's good. I think I'd
It's
have
probably
Australia number one because they won last year's Pacific Championship, came over here and won an Ashes Test Series 3-0. You'd have New Zealand at number two, and then there's a fair bit of debate. Probably Samoa 3, Tonga 4, and probably England 5.
It depends where you play the games, actually, John, because I think
Yeah,
Samoa and Tonga are a hell of a lot better when they're playing in front of their own supporters
I agree. I
in
agree.
Australia and New
But
Zealand.
that's unfortunately that's where we're going
It is. So, I mean, if we're talking about the
for the
World Cup
World
next
Cup.
year, maybe
Yeah,
we are number 5. Who knows? And we're keeping ahead of Papua New Guinea and Fiji and so on. But yeah,
but
it's
they're
just
improving and emerging. They really are, and that's because they've got now a structured international competition.
Mm,
At the end of their seasons, and the players have bought into it. The very much heritage players are looking to play to represent the families, and they've just bought into it. And
the
the
fans have
standard,
bought into it. That's a crucial
yeah,
thing.
they certainly have. Well, they're sold out regularly, aren't they? You
Yeah, yeah,
know, we had New Zealand against Samoa in the final, a packed house, and it was played in Australia. And
yeah.
you just see it just shows what rude health rugby league is in down under.
mm,
Absolutely. Yeah, yeah.
mm.
Just looking at the just coming back to the Ashes series though. Cameron Munster got the award as a player of the series. Got the Fulton Reilly Award. This new award named after the two greats, Bobby Fulton and Malcolm Reilly. And it was great to see Malcolm Reilly there, by the way, to be able to present that trophy to Munster. Did you think he was the best player? Did you think he was a player of the series, John? I mean, I know there are quite a few contenders from the Aussie side.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think you could argue with that because it was in lots of the important moments in all three tests, and I think Cameron Munster's great, mate, because he's just a competitor, isn't he?
Yeah,
No
yeah.
matter what's happening to his team, he'll roll his sleeve up and try something different. So you can't argue against him. Although I thought Harry Grant was fantastic, and obviously Reece Walsh had a massive impression as well, but. Yeah, and obviously Nathan Cleary, I loved Cleary's philosophy where he was team first and self second because he
Yes.
was happy to play a supporting role basically to the others, and he made the team such an effective team as a whole. So you could have had either of those four for me, but I'm certainly not going to argue against Cameron Munster. I think he's a great player, and I think he had 3 great games.
Absolutely. Yeah, yeah,
Mm.
yeah.
One thing I will say off the back of that is I think that's why the Australian halves find it so well to sort of steer that attack because they got Harry Grant there who can
Yeah.
get a quick play of the ball, look up, see that there's one marker, and then just go, and then get another quick play of the ball, and then how nice would it be Munster and Cleary and just play off the back of that? I think it just relieves so much pressure off them, and I think in some aspects that's sort of what Jez Litton did provide in
Yeah.
moments throughout the series. I think if Litton and whoever it be in the halves can just build on that combination and get that sorted for the World Cup, it could be a great advantage for them going into the World Cup.
Yeah, well, I mean, all I would say is that when the World Cup starts, Shaun needs to know who his 1, 6, 7, 9 is,
Mm.
and he just needs to know that and stick with them because it's really difficult to tinker with the spine of a team because they are your playmakers. And as I say, if it was me, I'd have Herbert Farnworth at 1. The halves I would pick on form at the minute, whether it's Lewis and Connor or whatever on next season's form. And at 9, I'd play Morgan Knowles at 9 and I'd play Smithies at 13, go after them and leather them in the first 20, 25 minutes. Litton is then the momentum changer after 20, 25 minutes, which is how Old Kingston Rovers used him with Mickey McAlorum, and then he came on after 25 minutes. and that would be I would be looking at that as my spine, and I would try to sort of sit down with that, have backup for if there's injuries, etc., and then look at the rest around them. And I think Brimson would be tremendous to have. But he could play in the centres, AJ Brimson, so you might well swap. But Farnworth's got to get... every time he carried the ball, you could sense there was an urgency in the Australian defence and a worry. And he still came up with great offloads and some great tackle busts. So we've got to get him the ball in his hand. Where your best ball carrier's got to get the ball in his hand.
Absolutely, yeah. And he didn't just quite get it enough, did he? That was the problem. Or get it in situations where he could do something actually with it.
Yes.
That was the problem, I think.
Who do you think was the player of the series from England?
Oh, that's a very good question.
Well, I think Farnworth perhaps is a strong contender. I thought Jez Litton is another strong contender.
He'd be mine.
I think Jez Litton, the way he came through, I think he's, if there's one player I think who's sealed his selection in next year's World Cup squad, I think it's Jez Litton, to be frank about it, based on the way that he played in this series.
Yeah, I would agree totally. I think you'd have to go for Litton because he's gone from a possible international player to a probable international player in every team. So I just think you've got, and he's a great one to build it around. And I think that, that needs to be the case going forward. But I still think he's more effective when the heat's gone out of the game and he's a momentum changer after 20, 25 minutes.
I mean, we've seen that too on this side of the world with State of Origin when we had Ben Hunt starting at 9 for Queensland, and then they'd bring Harry Green off the bench, and that was effective for Queensland for a few years, so why can't it work over there? But yes, brings me to the next point though. Golden Boot Award nominees. Who do you think will take out the Golden Boot this year? And will it be a player from the Ashes series, or will it be a player from the Pacific Championships?
I think it'll be Dylan Brown, personally, after the way he's played for New Zealand this year. I think he's been absolutely outstanding, and that's not to, be critical of anybody who played in the Ashes series, but I think Dylan Brown was the man who inspired New Zealand and really shone in every game he played, and just showed an incredible variety of skills. And I think he's a clear leader in the Golden Boot rankings this year. I mean, it's not been awarded, it's not been announced yet, has it? I don't think so. We don't know who has won it, but I would say he probably edges out Cameron Munster.
Yeah, it's hard to argue with that. I mean, he was tremendous, wasn't he, in that final? Although I thought the fullback was, and the young lad that just come back on the wing who seems to score more tries than the rest of the team. Is it McLean, the youngster on the wing and centre?
Casey McLean?
And I mean, he was tremendous as well. But you just can't look further than Brown, because Brown was a threat in everything that he did, and he was defensively very competent as well. So no arguments whatsoever from me.
It's hard to believe too that he got dropped from the Eels this year after he obviously signed with the Knights. His coach Jason Riles decided to look to the future, and Brown ended up playing a lot of New South Wales Cup to finish out the season. And then he's come back into an international camp and absolutely killed it. So I'm sure there's a lot of happy Knights fans out there that are smiling to see him playing so well.
Yes, so they should be, because they've got an exciting year in front. If he continues that form into the NRL, it'll certainly help turn the Knights around and improve their standing within the NRL.
Well, him playing alongside Kalen Ponga for Newcastle Knights, right, that looks exciting.
It'd be worth watching, wouldn't it? Worth watching.
Yeah.
Do we briefly? I mean, we've kind of touched on a little bit, but the New Zealand Samoa Pacific final, obviously New Zealand won 36-14. I obviously couldn't get down to Sydney for the game, too far away from me, but geez, the atmosphere coming through the TV speakers at home was unbelievable. What did you fellas make of it?
It was sensational, wasn't it? I mean, the Samoan and the Tongan fans, they really had something to the occasion, and it did look tremendous. And again, the number of people there in Australia for New Zealand v Samoa were sensational. And I thought the first half Samoa were tremendous and full value for that 14 points to 6. But then the second half performance from New Zealand, and I think this is why. This is one of my reasons when I'm applauding England for challenging Australia, and people are saying Australia's attack didn't look that connected. Well, New Zealand certainly did look connected. And I don't think Samoa challenged them enough. I think Samoa tired drastically as the game wore on. It might well have been lack of possession and the fact that all they were doing second half was tackling. But it's a credit to the quality of the New Zealand play. They had out, I don't know how many sets, but they didn't make an error, so it was 100% completion. And it certainly wasn't 5 drives and a kick. It was some calculated offloads where the risk and reward was taken on board, and it was some really good shape that you could tell that Stacey Jones had a big influence on how they were attacking.
Absolutely, yes. Interesting, isn't it, that they're coached by a guy who was an iconic halfback, and and can obviously see how to exploit the skill of somebody like Dylan Brown and the other guys in their spine. They're saying, by the way, that they ought to play Australia every year because, of course, they've not played Australia this year, given that Australia have come over here for the Ashes. And you can see why they'd want to do that, can't you? They want to test themselves against the Australians. And it's only 2 years ago that New Zealand beat them 30-0 in the final of the Pacific Cup. So, the Kiwis, to me, look stronger every year, John. And it certainly wouldn't be a massive shock to me to see them win the World Cup next year.
No, but don't underestimate Australia, Martyn. I mean,
no,
don't underestimate them because they are special. And that 30 points to 0 loss, I think it's galvanised the players and the coaches as well. And since then, their performance has been good. And they did Kane, they got the revenge the year after, didn't they, in the Pacific Championship? And then they've come over and 3-0. So they're a pretty decent team at Australia. Yeah. So it'd be a very exciting final. And it would genuinely be one where with either team winning wouldn't be a shock. But I'd still quite fancy Australia.
The great thing, though, about watching Samoa and Tonga in the Pacific Cup, you see all the flags and all the incredible enthusiasm, the two war dances before the game and so on that create such an atmosphere. When you watch it on TV, your first thought, or at least my first thought, is, God, I wish I was there. I'd love to be in that stadium experiencing that live. And I think it was James Graham on TV at the weekend or on a podcast who said that, the greatest atmosphere he played in was against, or that he experienced was
the semi-final.
Yeah. And, those fans just create something incredibly special, don't they? And you can understand in a way why they didn't perform as well when they came here, because obviously all their fans couldn't come with them. And I suppose that, they came out onto the pitch and they were missing all those people with the flags and the chanting and singing. But my God, they're going to be a challenge over there next year.
They are, very much so. And that was my reason for my current rankings, to tell you the truth. And yes, I would agree with you totally, Martyn. If Samoa and Tonga were coming over here for the World Cup, my rankings might well be different. But that would be my top 5 as I ranked previously.
As a Aussie, I'm a little bit worried about Samoa also getting Hamiso Tabuai-Fidow and Stephen Crichton back for that World Cup.
Yeah.
It's, getting stronger and stronger.
And what about if Tino decides he wants to play for Samoa as well?
Well, it makes me even more nervous, mate. We're losing our front rowers. No Payne Haas, no Tino. Who knows?
You've got plenty more, though, mate. I wouldn't worry too much.
Yeah, no. That's it. I think Lindsay Collins and Paddy Carrigan, Reuben Cotter, they all did a job this series. And I'm sure we'll find someone else. But one interesting headline I saw today, fellas, was a link between if England do go in another direction away from Shaun Wane, Michael Maguire's over in the country at the moment, apparently. Now, there's been a bit of a link made between England, potentially him, if the Broncos would allow him to go coach at an international level. Does he pose a threat to Shaun Wane keeping his job, do you think?
I'd be very surprised about that. The thing is, you can't coach Brisbane Broncos and then also have the time to coach, to think about England. I don't think. The Broncos is such a demanding job that I just don't think, I just don't think you could add the England job to it. I don't know what you think, John, but it wouldn't. I'd be really surprised.
I'd be more than surprised. I don't think there's a hope in hell that Michael Maguire is going to be England coach because at this moment. He's just won he's just won the grand final in the NRL last year, and I'm sure that the Broncos hierarchy are delighted with his contribution, but they still want to see them progress. I mean, one of the reasons he's over here is for the logistics for the World Cup Challenge, which shows the detail of preparation that he makes, and also for his personal development, to try and develop himself and make his coaching even better. So I don't think there's a hope in hell that he'll be looking to join England, and I don't think he should. I don't think we should have a coach coaching in the NRL, because inevitably the intensity of that and the depth of preparation that's required would mean that you wouldn't have much time to watch the Super League players, and you've got to be in and amongst it to really know who's playing well, and as I spoke earlier, I really do think form players should be selected.
Mm-hmm. Can I just raise one other issue, though, John? I mean, I think from what we've said so far, it's hard to see Shaun Wane being replaced as England coach for a variety of reasons we've already discussed. But one of the issues also that comes alongside what happens on the field is what happens off it. And the England squad this year were notable for not doing a great deal of PR work, either with the media or with the community and so on. It was, the Australians seemed to present a much more open sort of face, let's say, to the media and to the community. There were lots of stuff that showed Reece Walsh interacting with kids in Liverpool, for example, that sort of thing that you didn't see much of from England. And I just wonder whether, I mean, obviously, it's not just a case of wanting England to win the Ashes, but you want to garner more support at the same time. And I just wonder whether that is something that's a bit lacking at the moment from our team.
Yeah, I would agree with you. Yeah, I would agree, because, they were up in Leeds and they did lots of community work. They did an open training session and after the game. And I'm going to really pay compliment to the Australian hierarchy and the players, because they gave people time and they engaged with people. And I mean, Reece Walsh must have been sick of having a selfie taken with every man and woman and kid and the dog, but he never once seemed to turn it down. And that, just a superstar of a game giving up time like that is very, very rare. And I think we can learn from them with that as well. And, I believe that might be one thing that England learn for next time, is that don't just take your squad away in Wigan and train around there when the test match is in Leeds. Make sure you get and engage with the local people there, and make sure as well you get used to the Headingley ground, because I know everybody, all the England players that have played at Headingley before, but there again, it's just a nice little reminder in the build-up, whether it's just the captain run or whatever, to have an open training session with people invited in. And I just think we have to be more approachable, and we have to sell the game more like that, because I think it's a duty for everybody who's representing the game at the very highest level.
Yeah, we almost present a face that looks very dour to the outside world, don't we? As England, really, we come across as a sort of unsmiling, very serious, not willing to engage sort of squad, I think, and I think that's a bit unfair, because I'm sure that most of the guys in the England squad, if they got the chance and they were let off the leash a bit, they'd be really great with the community and with kids and
They
with
would. I
media
mean,
and
the
so on.
top lads, they're
Yeah, yeah,
really good lads, you know,
yeah, yeah.
and I'm certain it would help as well, because what it does as well, one of the things between test matches or at international is making sure that the time is positively filled in between. And
Mm,
that's one way it can be very positively done, you know. And so long as it doesn't feel as if you haven't got time to draw breath and sort of reflect, I think it's something that should really be put forward and be made an obligation as well, you know. Perhaps that there must be 2 community events a week, and there's got to be an
mm.
open training session, whatever it is, that can
Yeah, you
be
just plan ahead.
laid down to the coach prior to that, so
Mm,
they've got to do it, and they've got to be based in the area that the game's going to be played. And
yeah,
I just think it's common sense.
absolutely. So
Mm.
do I. Yeah, yeah.
I know, like Samoa and I guess Tonga have been doing it as well. Every city that they've played
Yeah,
in, they've held a fan day, which is like in an area where the islander communities tend to live in Australia. For instance, in Brisbane, I think Samoa had one down in Logan, which is just sort of south of Brisbane and has a pretty strong islander population down there. And it was like it was a concert down there. The amount of fans that rushed down and all the players got up on stage and gave a bit of a speech. And I think that's why you see so many flags waving in the crowd. It's because the players care about the fans
Yeah,
care about the
build up
players, and
support.
yeah.
that's right. And and I'm not saying that England players don't feel the same way, but they don't get the opportunity to show that they
No,
feel the same way.
there's a connection, Jake. There's a connection between them and the fans, and we're good at that at club level. To tell the truth, in Super League, you know, the players are good at engaging with fans and making the fans feel part of the club. But I just think we've got to make sure it transfers as well to international level, and that's got to be structured in. Not done as a favour. It's got to be structured informally so that it's part of that week's timetable. And I'm sure it can be worked out with, whoever's in charge at that moment in time.
Mm. And
Mm.
just moving on to other things. I'm just a bit conscious of time moving on now. Some of the stories that have been around in the last week or two since you were last with us, John. What do you think of Paul Wellens going to North Queensland as an assistant?
Marvellous. Really good. Really
Yeah,
good. I think it'll do Paul the world of good because, Paul's been ensconced in St. Helens and the St. Helens Club
most of his
virtually all
life.
his life. Yeah,
Mm,
and he'll see something totally different. The pressure will be off him completely, which is good, and he'll be able to learn more, but he'll also be able to contribute fully to that club as well. So I'm really pleased for Paul, and I think it will be a big factor in his coaching development in the future, and it will keep him amongst the coaching elite because it's so difficult as a St. Helens job because expectations are so high. And when you're one of their favourite sons, which Kieran Cunningham found out and Paul's now found out, they're pretty unforgiven despite what you've done as a player.
yeah, yeah.
So, I think Paul will flourish and develop in those surroundings. I think it's a great move for him, and I think it's a good move for the NRL club as well.
Mm, mm. And another former Saints star, Sean Long, has just left Oldham. I wonder where he's going, John. Do you because
I've
yeah,
no idea. No, I've no
yeah,
idea. And it's. I mean, he won the League One title, didn't he? And he got
yeah,
him in the
yeah.
top four last time. So, you'd say from a purely performance perspective, he's had a good couple of seasons. But I mean, it was a shock to me. I mean. I'm not on Twitter and so on and so forth, but my wife showed me that she said, "Do you know Sean Long's left Oldham?" And I said, "No, not at all." And it was a shock to me last night. So it will be interesting to see where he turns up, and
Well,
it'll
the
be
question
interesting
is,
to
as
see
I
what they
say,
go.
was it a case of Oldham wanting him out, or was it a case is that he's had an offer elsewhere, maybe as an assistant coach with a Super
Yeah,
League club, and that's why he's leaving. So that remains to be seen, doesn't it? I
it
think.
does. Yeah, it does. But it's a surprise one, an interesting one.
Yeah, yeah, no doubt about it. Yeah.
Mm. All right, fellas. Anything else we want to touch on? Or I guess just more broadly before we leave today. Obviously, getting the Ashes back up and running again has been a great thing for the international game. You feel like there's a real appetite now for this fixture to be a regular fixture in the international wider calendar?
Yeah,
There's
I do.
talk of this every 4 years coming over here, isn't there now? Which would be great.
I think it's got to be reciprocal though as well, Matt. I think we've got
Yeah,
to
yeah,
go over to Australia as well. And actually show them that we're not as bad as we're perceived.
yeah.
And I'm certain that the players could do that. But and it's we've got an international calendar sorted out for the next 3 years, haven't we, for the Tier 1 nations? Well, let's hope we can do it for all the nations, and let's hope it can be done for more than 3 years. Let's start a proper cycle, because that's one strength that rugby union have, is the fact that they know where they're playing years in advance, and consequently they can market it, etc. Fans can book tours and so on and so forth, and it becomes an occasion. And we need to learn from that and progress. And I'm sure there is that willingness from the NRL and the hierarchy within the NRL to do that. And if they're willing to do that, it'll happen. So I'm very confident and optimistic about the international game.
But we do need the World Cup details to be announced in the very near future, because I've got travel companies wanting to advertise trips there, but they're saying it's getting too late, because people like to plan ahead. And if you're going to go to Australia to watch a tournament, people like to have 2 or 3 years to plan ahead and save up for it and so on.
Well, it's a few thousand quid, isn't it? It's a few thousand quid you're going to have to invest to get over there and to stay over there. So, and not everybody can reach in their pocket and just have that. So, you do need to be able to plan and prepare for such a thing. And I agree with you totally, Martyn. And the sooner it's announced, the better it is. Although we do know the first game is going to be New Zealand, Australia, and we don't know when the final is. So, perhaps they could build around that. But we don't know where England are going to be based, and whether they're playing any games in PNG. There's still work to do, but I am optimistic about the international game, because I do think there is a willingness and a buy-in now from the NRL to develop it.
Absolutely. Okay, mate.
Right, fellas. Well, we might wrap things up here. Do it again next week, I guess, Martyn. Thanks again for joining us, John.
Pleasure.
It's been a pleasure having you on, mate, and getting the expert opinion following a pretty intense end to the Ashes series. Anything else, Martyn?
No, it's a pleasure to have had John on, and it's always great because John's got such terrific experience in so many different fields in our sport, and as a player, a coach, a broadcaster, John, you come at it from so many angles, and it's I've always got enormous respect for your opinion, mate. And
thank you.
Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, well, it's been an absolute pleasure, and have a good Christmas, and hopefully we'll see you soon.
Thanks a lot, John.
I was about to say, just lastly, no rugby league this weekend. What are you going to do with yourselves? I don't know what to do with myself.
That's a good call, Jake.
I think my wife might suddenly discover that she's got a husband. Put it that way.
I think there's a bit of decorating to be done, Jake. So
Better you than me, mate. Better you than me.
Correct.
All right, fellas. Thanks again. Cheers.
Thanks, Jake. Thank you.
Thanks, Jake.
Thanks, Martyn.